The people who slept outside on the bare ground, close enough to lions that they could hear them breathing, slept better than you did last night. No mattress, no locked door, no four walls, and, as far as anyone can tell, no insomnia. Some of the groups still living closest to that ancient way of life don't even carry a word for lying awake at night. Which means the bedtime story we all absorbed, that our ancestors slept rough and modern comfort sleep, is aimed in precisely the wrong direction. So how did ancient humans get through the night, exposed and in the dark, and come out the far side more rested than a species with memory foam and blackout curtains? Let's dig in because the boring questions have the best answers. Now, if that's true, if they really did sleep soundly out there, it hands us a far better question than did they sleep well. The question is how, because on paper, that night should have been unsurvivable for sleep. Think about what your nervous system does the instant it senses danger. It flatly refuses to power down. Now stack up their conditions. Nothing between them and whatever hunted after dark. No door to lock, because doors didn't exist. Ground cold enough to ache, no roof against the rain, and a wall of night sounds where any one of them might mean something has found you. Every single item on that list is a 5-alarm reason for the brain to stay switched on until sunrise. And the sleep held anyway. That means they hadn't simply survived the night, they'd solved it. They carried working answers to problems we no longer even file as problems because we bulldoze them with brick and central heating. And the genuinely uncomfortable part surfaces when you set their solutions beside your own bedroom. The tools they had, and the ones we quietly misplaced, start to explain why you snap awake at 3 a.m. in a house that contains none of their dangers. So, set aside whether ancient humans slept well. The real question is what they knew that we've forgotten. 3 things carried the weight: what they slept on, what actually signaled their bodies to sleep, and a lost nightly habit that would make your great-great-grandparents stare at your sleep schedule like you'd gone mad. Start with the bed. For nearly all of human history, the mattress did not exist. That didn't leave people flopping onto raw stone and hoping. At a site called Sibudu Cave in South Africa, archaeologists recovered the remains of bedding roughly 77,000 years old, long before farming, before writing, before anything resembling a village. And it wasn't a lazy pile of leaves, it was constructed. The researcher Lynn Wadley and her team found thick layers of compacted sedges and grasses, deliberately cut and hauled into the cave to sleep on. Impressive enough on its own. The next detail is where it gets clever. Spread across the top of that grass were leaves from a particular plant, a wild quince whose foliage is packed with natural insect-killing compounds. Someone 77,000 years ago had worked out how to build a mattress that fended off mosquitoes and biting bugs while they slept. A pest-proof bed sheet, invented before the wheel. People indifferent to sleep don't bother with that. That's a species treating a good night's rest as a problem worth engineering around. So the surface was handled. The larger puzzle is the shape of the night, and for that we turn to a landmark study. In 2015, the sleep scientist Jerome Siegel and his team fitted activity monitors on members of 3 traditional societies living on 2 separate continents with no contact between them: the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, and the Tsimane of Bolivia. 3 peoples, isolated from one another, living roughly the way humans lived for hundreds of thousands of years. If you want the nearest thing to a window into ancient sleep, this is it. The measurements toppled one assumption after another. For a start, these groups didn't sleep more than us. They slept a touch less, around 6.5 hours a night. The tender image of ancient people knocked out for 10 hours between dusk and dawn is a fantasy. When the sun went, they stayed up. They sat by the fire for hours, talking, joking, spinning long, meandering stories, and only sank into sleep well after full dark. Second, the thing that switched sleep on wasn't what anyone guessed. Not darkness, temperature. Their bodies wound down as the night air cooled and began to rouse as it bottomed out, just before dawn. Their entire cycle rode the rise and fall of the day's heat, a cue we've all but erased with heaters, air conditioners, and a thermostat that pins the bedroom to one flat number from lights out to alarm. And third, the finding that made the headlines: chronic insomnia was, for all practical purposes, missing. Asked about the experience of simply being unable to fall asleep, people were puzzled by the premise. It wasn't a box they carried in their heads. The affliction that keeps a vast share of the modern world glaring at the ceiling was, to them, about as familiar as snow to someone raised in the desert. So the picture keeps turning over. There's a third clue, though, and it comes not from a cave or a wristband, but from old paper. Because even after humans moved indoors, they slept in a way you'd find frankly weird. The historian Roger E. Kirch spent years working through diaries, medical manuals, court records, and private letters from the centuries before electric light. One odd phrase kept resurfacing: first sleep, and elsewhere, second sleep. People dropped these terms in casually, the way you'd mention lunch, as though everyone plainly knew the reference. Someone would note waking between their first and second sleep and carry right on. E. Kirch gradually understood he'd uncovered an entirely different architecture of the night, one that had been ordinary for ages, then disappeared so completely we forgot it was ever there. So what were these two sleeps? Before artificial light rewrote the evening, most people didn't sleep in a single block. They slept in two. You'd go down a couple of hours after dark, your first sleep. Then, around midnight or 1 in the morning, you'd rise back to the surface. No jolt of alarm, no thrashing, just calmly, expectedly awake for an hour or two. What makes it remarkable is that the waking wasn't dead time, or dreaded. It was used. The Kirch found this dark middle hour ran its own quiet economy. Some prayed. There were devotions written for exactly this window. Some rose to feed the fire or look in on the animals. Some lay murmuring with the person beside them. Couples often kept it for private matters. Physicians of the day openly recommended the hour for it. Others simply floated in a loose, half-dreaming state, letting the day settle before sliding back down into second sleep until morning. Two sleeps, with a calm, wakeful island drifting between them. For a long stretch of human history, that wasn't a disorder or an oddity. That was just an ordinary Tuesday. Which raises the deeper question buried under all of it. Why would human sleep come pre-built with a gap in the middle? Why should it be so easy to break it all? That points to a striking idea called the sentinel hypothesis. Go back to a group asleep in the open, predators loose in the dark. If every last member dropped into the same dead, identical coma at the same moment, the whole group would sit defenseless from dusk to dawn. Evolution rarely tips in favor of that. So what if we were shaped not to do it? The researcher David Sampson put the idea to the test, again with the Hadza. His team tracked more than 30 adults across many nights, and the result stopped people cold. Over all those people and all those hours, there was almost never a single moment when everyone was asleep at once. Someone was always stirring, nudging the embers, sitting up, shifting, dozing light with one ear open. As a unit, the group was never fully switched off. The reason is something you already know from your own household. People run on different clocks. Some crash early and ping awake at sunrise. Some don't switch on until midnight and treat 7 a.m. as a personal insult. We usually shrug this off as personality, or as a character flaw, if you're the one who can't rise. Sampson's case is that it's neither. It's a safety system. Seed a group with a few early risers, a few night owls, and a handful of light sleepers who wake at every snapped twig, and the coverage sorts itself out. The night owl takes the first watch. The light sleepers hold the dead middle. The larks take over before dawn. Nobody is posted to a shift. Nobody volunteers. It simply emerges automatically from the plain fact that we're all wired a little differently. Your ancestors ran an all-night watch rotation that no one ever drew up. Sampson called it the sentinel hypothesis, the notion that our light, breakable, patchwork sleep isn't a fault, but a mechanism, one that kept the group from ever being fully unconscious together. And running through all of it was fire. Taming it rebuilt the human night. Flame shoved the darkness back, and the predators with it. Most animals won't walk up to a fire. It cleared a warm, guarded ring where people could finally lower their guard far enough to sleep deep. And it opened those hours between sunset and first sleep, the very hours the Hadza still fill today, for the thing our species may love even more than rest. Sitting shoulder to shoulder in the dark, warm, talking until the fire sinks to coals. Draw the threads together, and you land somewhere that might genuinely reshape how you feel about your own worst nights. We've all swallowed one narrow definition of good sleep: 8 hours, a single unbroken slab, alone, or beside one other person, in a silent, sealed, blacked out, temperature locked box. Wake in the small hours, and the verdict is instant: a malfunction. Insomnia. Fix it. Now hold that beside what the evidence actually shows. Traditional humans slept in company, not solitary confinement. They slept through moving temperatures, not a frozen setting. They woke deliberately in the dead of night and treated it as unremarkable. Their sleep stayed light and porous by design, because porous sleep is what kept the group breathing. And none of it arrived wrapped in dread, because none of it counted as a problem to begin with. Turn it around, and the strange sleeper in this story is us, lying in a soundproofed black box, expecting to dissolve into 8 straight hours of nothing entirely alone, then spiraling at the first 3 a.m. wake-up. That's the recent invention. That's the artificial pattern, and it's only a couple of centuries old. It rode in on gaslight and electric bulbs, on factory whistles and rail timetables that demanded every worker be unconscious and upright on the same rigid clock, which quietly rewrites the thing we've been trained to hate. Much of what gets stamped insomnia may be no defect at all. That 3 a.m. surfacing could be the old first sleep, second sleep rhythm rising back up, right on schedule. That thin, twitchy sleep where you clock every creak of the house, that's the sentinel wiring, the same instinct that carried your family through 100,000 dark nights. The real gap isn't between a healthy sleeper and a broken one. It's between an ancient body doing exactly what it was built to do, and a modern world that has decided its oldest habits are symptoms. Ancient humans made it through the night by refusing to fight any of this. They let the fire burn, let someone stay up, let themselves wake, and never once told themselves they were doing it wrong. So picture the night one last time. Except now you can see everything in it. Deep dark, tens of thousands of years ago. You're lying on a bed of grass and quince leaves that somebody built to keep the insects off. The ground is cold, and yes, something is moving in the brush. But you're not alone on that ground. Your whole group is pressed in close for warmth. The fire still lives, holding the predators out at the edge of the light. And of the dozen people lying near you, at least one is awake at any given moment. The night owl feeding the embers, the light sleeper who caught that rustle, listened, and judged it nothing. With no word spoken and no plan made, you are being watched over. So you let go, and you fall into your first sleep. Hours later, in the still middle of the night, you'll wake. No fear in it, no failure, just awake in the quiet. The way people have woken in the dark far longer than we've had the words to write it down. Maybe you'll trade a few low words with the body beside you. Maybe you'll only watch the fire breathe. Then you'll slide back down into your second sleep while the night keeps running its old, unscheduled watch around you. So the next time you snap awake at 3 a.m., certain something inside you has gone wrong. Reach for the older explanation. It isn't a fault. It's an inheritance. It's 100,000 years of ancestors waking in the dark, listening, keeping watch, and calmly lying back down. The wiring still works. It's only waiting for the fire, and the people that once made it safe to close your eyes.